Hey, this is Josh Brahm here to respond to another listener mail. This is a listener voicemail. You can leave us listener voicemail that I'll actually play the audio. That number is area code 559-851-5433. Once again, that's 559-851-LIFE. And this is someone responding to a recent episode we did. It's number 142. It was with Scott Klusendorf and Jonathan Keller. We were talking about voting principles. And do you always vote for the most pro-life candidate, or does sometimes party politics come into it? I think it was a really good discussion, but this is someone who's responding to that episode. And I'm just going to start by playing what he had to say.
Hey, I just watched your Life Report number 142, and I disagree with the entire concept of voting pro-life for the most pro-life candidate or the most. It's a whole lot like a chess game. You don't make the absolute best move, take the rook, take the piece that you can possibly make, because you know that your opponent is going to get his turn after you make your move. And the idea is winning the game, not winning the short-term gain. And it's the same thing with our political system. You have Democrats and Republicans each taking turns. That's the way it works. And you vote for what you want for a short term, you're going to lose the long-term game. And the idea is to win the long-term game. Please respond to this.
Okay, so I obviously appreciate the response. I'm not sure what method the listener is advocating you do instead, like what voting principle would be kind of the replacement with. It kind of sounded like you're saying don't vote pro-life, or maybe don't vote, or maybe it seemed like our voting principle was short-term. It's not very clear to me what he's advocating we do instead, but I do have a few thoughts in response to the things that he did say. I think where we have common ground is that we agree that it's always good to keep our eyes on both the short-term and the long-term gains. I think pretty much everybody agrees with that. Although I will say, the listener used the phrase "winning the game." If our political system, or the way our political system works, is basically, the way the listener advocated was basically like it's just Republicans and Democrats, and it's a ping pong match back and forth between them. I guess I'm not really sure what the phrase "winning the game" means. I mean, I think it seems like, well, there would never be a full winning of the game, but I do agree with the idea of trying to keep your eyes on both short-term and long-term goals. Another thing is I like chess analogies, and I've used chess analogies before when talking strategy, when talking about strategy, whether pro-life strategy. Mainly this comes up for me, obviously, in my work. I'm in communication with pro-life people from many different strategic camps, and one of the major in-party debates or in-house debates is whether we ought to be attempting state personhood amendments right now or not. We haven't talked about that too much on the show. It's come up a few times. We talked about it in one of the open line episodes that no one heard. But my position, I'm not going to get into it. I don't think that right now we should be trying state personhood amendments because of the Supreme Court. And I think a chess analogy does play well here. When you're talking short-term, long-term, my first question for state personhood amendment people is, what is your plan if you win? If you get some, relatively conservative state like Mississippi or Georgia to actually pass a state personhood amendment, that's a full frontal assault on Roe. What then? Either the Supreme Court will just completely reject it, and that happened in Texas a while back, because it just is they defined their constitution and what the unborn was. I think I need to relook at this, but Stephen Ertel has a huge article about this, but they defined something, and they basically said we declare the unborn to be persons, and the Supreme Court basically said, okay, well, it's fine that you call them persons, but they're not they're not as far as the law is concerned, because Roe versus Wade, we've already done this. And so my question is, but let's just say the Supreme Court did take it, then what do you do if when the bill goes there? Okay, we can take a look at what the layout of the Supreme Court is right now, and I wouldn't say it's in our favor, especially when you talk about overturning Roe. And so what's the kind of the long, what are you thinking long term? And I don't feel like I've gotten very good responses to that. Although I did get one response from one person who I won't name the person, but one of the kind of big leaders was saying, maybe we actually have a majority in the Supreme Court and we don't really know. It's almost a little bit conspiracy theory like, maybe we've got all these Supreme Court justices that do want abortion to go away and they're just waiting for the moment and we need to give them that moment. It's like, I don't buy that at all. I think actually the best estimates that are that, several of the justices that we would say are conservative or even pro-life have even gone out publicly and said that we shouldn't overturn Roe right now. So it's probably like it's less good for us, not more good than we're thinking. So then, we bring in, we talk chess, if we're going to look long term, obviously I agree, we're in our persons and eventually we need to, ideally we will have abolished abortion and there will be some kind of probably federal amendment or I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but we all agree on the end-term goal. The question is, do we go for that goal, the very end right now? Do we swing for the fences if we know that, it'd be kind of like, swinging for the fences when there's a huge net up or like there's nothing, that kind of thing. So anyway, there's a whole debate and I don't want to oversimplify either end. There are things that personhood people would respond with and there's things I would respond with, but we're not doing that right now. So all that to say, I like chess analogies and I use chess analogies sometimes, but I don't think that the chess analogy works in this case where we're talking, politics and voting principles. I don't think that this chess analogy works because I think politics is more complex and less predictable than chess, as complex as chess is. There's no guaranteed setups in politics. You can't reliably see several elections ahead. And in chess, at least you've got, I was talking to John Keller about this, and he made the point, like, at least in chess, you have control of half the board, right? And in politics, you've got control of a few, or you're trying to gain control of a few pieces. And you don't have to, this idea of how complex politics is, it's not like you got to look back 50 years for this. Just look at the last election. In January of 2007, everybody who was in, political strategy knew that Hillary Clinton was going to be the Democrat nominee. And everybody knew that John McCain would not be the Republican nominee. And obviously they were wrong on both fronts. If we can't even predict, 6 to 9 months ahead on who the current nominees are going to be, how can, I don't understand what would be the system where you're going to vote based on long-term versus kind of, with what you've got right now. In this episode, I do actually ask, and I'm not sure if the listener missed it or not, but it was just, which would be fine. We do a lot in 28 minutes, so a lot of people I know will listen to these sometimes more than once to make sure they kind of caught everything. But around the 22-minute mark, I asked Scott about an argument that I have heard several pro-life people say. It's like, look, we need, the GOP doesn't take pro-life people seriously enough. There's too many Republicans that they might be pro-life, but they care more about being fiscally conservative, or they care about, whatever, but not enough about the pro-life issue. So let's hand them a loss, and then they will kind of see how much they need us, and then they'll come and this would be this long-term thing. And I asked Scott about that, and basically Scott said two things about that. He said, first, that's exactly what President Obama wants us to do. In 2012, we can easily hand Obama 4 more years. Secondly, it's kind of the principle that Scott's advocating that I agree with is you got to vote based on what you have right now. So ultimately, I agree with Scott on this one. I think that while we need to have both long and short-term goals, at this point we should vote in every election based on the options we actually have. And I did a speech on voting principles a long time ago, and I took some principles that I was debating people that were talking about voting third party at the time, and my brother said something really good, and I'd heard Greg Kokel say other things, so I'm not really sure what I got from whom, but basically the summary of my position on voting was I believe we should vote to make a difference, not to make a statement. I'm almost positive that's Greg Kokel. We should vote to make a difference, not to make a statement. And another way of putting it would be we should vote such that our vote most likely creates the political situation we most favor this upcoming election. As Donald Rumsfeld said, you fight the war with the army that you have, not the army that you want. So I would say that you fight the war with the presidential candidate that you have, not the candidate that you want.